Today, I'm going to show you how you can take a rusty old Mk.1 Rhodes and turn it into a mostly functioning stage piano. I'm going to preface this video by saying that I am sick, so my voice will sound a little bit different, but the backstory on this keyboard is that I bought it off Facebook Marketplace for $500. It was pretty much inoperable. Some of the keys did work, but a lot of the bushings were all messed up and partially not there. There was evidence of water damage and rodent damage, so it really had the whole kit and caboodle. Because of that, I'm glad I got it for that price because I don't think I would have paid any more. And also, it took a substantial amount of work and a little over 6 months of getting it fully operational to the best that I currently can get it to. Now, when I first got it in my hands, I did document a good part of the keyboard the way I got it, so I can do a little transformation video for you. So you'll see some of these photos now of what it looked like when I first got it. As you can see, the tines and subsequent dampers were very rusty and had a lot of particulates all over them. They were not at all usable in their current state, so I did have to de-rust them all. I soaked them in a rust remover for a few days and then steel wooled them off and polished them up with some Flitz metal polish. That did help a bunch in terms of the tines. And I also did that with the hardware, though I did end up replacing the hardware in the end because of the severe pitting that was happening due to the lengthy rust damage. Looking at the lid, it was quite moldy and mildewy, so I sanded that all down, and then I did end up spray painting it and clear coating that, which turned out all right, though I wouldn't have done it again. I have never re-Tolexed anything before, and I didn't want to start now, so I thought a real cheap way would just be to spray paint it, though it did take a hell of a lot longer than I initially anticipated. Looking under the keys, you can see in the right back side of the key bed, there was the water damage and rodent issues. There was a decent bit of fungus or mold growing under the back 5 or 6 keys, and it was really gross to clean out. The poor mice or whatever were using some broken tines as a soft little bed, which I would not wish on my greatest enemy. But I cleaned all that out. I scrubbed the key bed and the bottom of the case, which was also pretty gross. And then I went to my first main issue, which was the key bushings. Now, the felt bushings are notably important because they keep your keys from moving side to side, and you'll know you have bad bushings when your keys are all jiggly and there's no tightness to them in terms of their lateral or their horizontal movement. Your bushings are just 2 little felt pads on each side of your center rail and your front rail. They are attached to the key and the key stem, and when they fall off due to age or the glue failing or whatnot, you have to replace them, and it's a pretty lengthy process. Granted, if you have the correct tools or you are a piano technician, it's a pretty easy job, just takes a while. I ended up doing pretty much 70% of the keys. It was all an issue with the balance rail felts. The front rail felts were fine, so that was good. Though there was definitely a hell of a lot of wear on the felts that I didn't replace, yet they are still fine and don't move very much at all. Once I got all the bushings done, I moved on to the bump mod. This action did not feel very great at all, despite some other early 70s models. So I did install the bump mod on all the keys and all the pedestals, which again is pretty much the most lengthy process next to the bushings, but it is an important and rewarding one once you actually get to play the keyboard. After I got all that stuff off, I took off the harp, started cleaning the metal pickups. You can see over there the before and after. I went on to the dampers. The dampers were really impacted and were showing large signs of wear. So I decided to replace them all, which was good, though ended up having a lot of problems for the first few months because of it. The felt was just way too hard, and I did install it correctly, but I really needed to needle and break up those felts to make it a little bit easier dampening wise, or else you would get this slight buzz when the damper would come in contact with the moving tine, and for a second it'd be really annoying because after every keystroke you'd hear that zzz, and then it would stop. After a few months though of it resting, they did develop a nice little nook in each of the tines, and it did make it a lot easier on the dampening aspect of it. Once I got all that replaced, it was pretty easy regulation wise. I did polish the rail pins and of course swapped out the felts. From there I leveled the keys, squared the keys, and adjusted for key dip, which helps greatly with escapement and making sure the rest of the action feels good. I found the strike line was actually pretty good on this, so I didn't move it. And I didn't need to shim each side of the harp as well. I found that was just fine. After all that was done, I put on all my tone bars, all my tines, and got to voicing and tuning. Tuning wasn't that bad at all, since these tone bars are a little easier to move around, but the voicing did take a little bit longer. I first started off with going for a more harmonic sound to get a little more bite, but recently I switched back to a more fundamental sound, which gets you more of the bell-esque sound of the Rhodes, because granted, most people do like having a bit more bark. If I wanted bark, I'd just go play the Wurlitzer. So I tried to bring this as fundamental as I could. It still is a little barky, which is good. I do want a little bit of dynamics, but it sounds a lot better than it initially did the first few months of playing. And mentioning how long I've played it for, I do find myself changing how I like my Rhodes the longer I play with it. I finished this keyboard about 2 months ago, and since then have adjusted the voicing and the pickup distance about 2 times, getting a little more cleaner and a little more fundamental as I go on. It's a lot easier to do this on a Rhodes than it would be a Wurlitzer or a Hohner, and I find that pretty nice as long as you do have easy access to the internals and not a stacker system on top. That can get pretty annoying. I also went along and changed out the hammers. Before, I have never changed out the hammers on a Rhodes piano, but I decided to now just because they were so hard and I felt they may have been making an impact on the buzzing sound that I was hearing. They did not, but it does sound a hell of a lot better with the new fresh rubber ones on, and it wasn't too hard. My only tip would be to make sure all of the glue is off the hammer head, or I should say the hammer shank, where the rubber tip sits on. If that's not all cleared, it's not going to be level on there, and your flow of energy might be a little bit distorted because of it. And they could fall off easier if there's not a clean, even glue surface. I did find the treble end to be a lot harder to glue than the rest of them, but I think that was because the wood on my hammerhead was flat when the rubber tips were serrated. So it made it a little bit difficult for the CA glue to adhere to the wood. As always, I did replace the rubber grommets and screws for my tone bars because when the rubber gets hard in those grommets, the vibrations don't translate as well from the tine to the tone bar, and you get a muddier tone. When that's fresh and nice rubber in there, you get your high ends and you get a lot more sustain out of each note. The capacitor on my tone potentiometer did fail, So I did swap it with a 0.047 microfarad orange cap capacitor, which does make it work fine. And other than that, I did do some cosmetic work on it, just the usual Meguiar's convertible top cleaner on the Tolex. It leaves a nice smooth finish, unlike Armor All, which makes that slick and really weird feeling finish that I personally don't like. I have heard that you can use Armor All as long as you wipe it off right away with a rag. That seems to help the finish, they said, along with keeping it nice and clean. But I have yet to try that. I did swap out the hardware, and these legs are not original. I tried getting the original legs working, but they were extremely rusted on the inside and would not move out or stay stable because of the hinge hardware inside of it being broken. I didn't want to mess with that, so I found these for a pretty good deal, and I just went with that. Honestly, you could skip getting the crossbars. It does help a lot. It does not move at all with the crossbars, but on my 88, it is necessary to get the crossbars. I did want to talk about the damper system a little bit, as when you push down on the pedal, it raises a rod, which then raises a metal sheet up on a hinge, so it has the front portion go down, which pushes the little damper arms all down, making it sustain. Mine did not have the center hinge that stopped it from going all the way up that big metal sheet. So I had to install that hinge, which I haven't done before, and I had to finick a little bit with the 2 hinge pins on the side to get it not squeaking anymore. I usually wrap them in tissue paper and then put them in so they're nice and tight on those screw holes and they don't wobble at all. If you have any play in your sustain system, it's because of that wobble and or a issue with your rod connecting to the wooden dowel in there. Now, talking about the stage piano itself, this is my first 73 key Mk.1. I did have an 88 key 1975 Mk.1. That was nice, but the 88 is just way too much. And I feel most people already know that. It is only an extra 10 to 15 pounds, but the size it takes up is an extra 10 to 15 inches. And the 73 is just a perfect range for me. And I find that those higher end notes don't ring out as well on the Rhodes and aren't very much needed in terms of the space that it takes up. If you need to move this on your own, or if you're encumbered in any way, I would suggest taking off the harp inside. This makes it a lot easier to move it around, and it takes about 10 to 15 pounds off the keyboard, which is a lot. When you look at the size and the weights online, this is usually including the legs and the lid, which are a decent 20 to 30 pounds on top of the keyboard itself. This can help greatly with reducing the weight and making each trip a little bit easier rather than carrying a small casket. I did have to DIY a RCA Jack for the harp output to the control panel here, the front name rail. Mine was broken and chewed out, so I did have to take a RCA cable or one of the plugs and wire it into that wire that hooks up to the volume and tone pots to get it working. I did also have to replace 4 bridle straps, which connect the damper to the hammer butt, allowing the damper to come down when the hammer comes up. Without this, the hammer is just going to hit an already dampened tine and you won't hear much. It can be a little bit of a pain to replace these, and they're really delicate. So I would advise being very careful when being around these, as they can easily break off, at least mine do. And the hook that they're attached to will come with it, so you have to either replace the damper arm or glue the bridle strap tab to the damper arm. And make sure you get it right, or else you have to unglue it and do it again. And lastly, I'm going to show you the 2 demos I recorded for this system, one showcasing the harsher tones of the keyboard and the other one showing the more bell-like subtle tones you can get when playing softer. If you enjoy these 2 demos, I have tons of videos of me playing pianos like this on my channel, and I do a lot more how-to guides on vintage instruments just like this one. So stick around, and I hope you enjoyed the video.